Act 4, Recent Treatments. This final act begins in 2006, just a few years after the last one ended. Not necessarily because there was any major shift in approach. In fact, we've seen a lot of consistency in this century-long struggle, but because I had to end it somewhere. And in the last 15 years, it seems Dialogue has only published a couple of articles that I could find on evolution. In a way, that's not so bad. The issues haven't really evolved that much, pun intended, except these last two articles really do raise some new theological questions. In 2006, Kent C. Condie publishes Premortal Spirits: Implications for Cloning, Abortion, Evolution, and Extinction. This is a really interesting article that comes at the issue of evolution not from the perspective of creationism or biblical authority, but rather from the distinctive LDS teachings about premortality. What is the relationship between the premortal spirit and the genetically produced body? How does free agency match up to genetic constraints? Don't genes imply the heresy of predestination or determinism? Condie proposes some solutions to these problems by suggesting that specific spirits aren't necessarily predestined to inhabit specific bodies. This addresses the issue of cloning and abortion as well, not to mention evolution. So Condie supports the idea of a created spirit rather than an eternal one, and a more generic spirit that doesn't necessarily have to be predestined to anticipate every single genetic development over thousands and thousands of generations. The final article is Spring 2010 by famed scholar and author Stephen Peck. Crawling Out of the Primordial Soup, a Step Toward the Emergence of an LDS Theology Compatible with Organic Evolution. Peck is an evolutionary biologist at BYU. This article asks an even more profound question about evolution. He goes specifically to the heart of the question, not about the compatibility of a divinely guided evolution, but about the ethics of such a view. Isn't the God of such a theology pretty brutal in his direction of nature to produce the current results? What other theological ideas does evolution challenge besides creationism? This essay looks at a number of what he calls, quote, sticking points in compatibilism. So this essay is really theological, exploring the problems that evolution raises from several different theological perspectives. Peck puts forward what he calls Mormon evolutionary theology here. This draws on the historical attempt to reconcile evolution and LDS thought, going back to the 1911 BYU professors, John Widsoe, B.H. Roberts, James E. Talmage, and others. But Peck also discusses those ethical issues, natural evils, he calls them, that seem to be implied by the idea of an intelligent designer. How we got to where we are was not a very clean path. Instead, Peck draws on ideas in contemporary LDS theology that limit God's role in the human drama, including limiting his power as designer. This arises as a solution to the problem of evil as well. Quote, "To me, evolution is an empowering idea. Linking it to our theology provides answers to several perplexing questions. It suggests that there is something wonderfully important about embodiment and why physical access to the universe is so important. Our doctrines, informed by evolution, answer questions about why such a cruel and wasteful process was chosen for creation and resituate the problem of evil. I find easy adaptations to our most important and profound doctrines. I see no reason why Mormons cannot, fully and without apology, embrace Darwinian evolution." It seems to me that we end in a truly new place. Peck provides a framework for a full, if long delayed, theological assessment of Mormonism in light of Darwinian evolution. We aren't just hand-wringing about it anymore or writing the history of how we got ourselves into a creationist quagmire, but truly seeing scholars engage wholeheartedly with evolution, including giving up intelligent design. Since 2010, I couldn't find another article on evolution in Dialogue. Perhaps that's a good sign, in a way, that the force of the issue has died down. It seems less urgent now. Still, that transformation is interesting and holds a lesson, I think. Sometimes these tough issues take decades, if not generations, to work themselves out, or at least to work themselves into a stalemate. BYU professors aren't getting fired anymore or facing serious opposition. Dialogue isn't getting letters to the editor decrying evolutionary ideas. If Dwayne Jeffrey represented the beginning of our journey with evolution in Dialogue, and Stephen Peck our ending point, we also see that the nature of the questions have changed as well as the theological sophistication of the answers. Still, though I'm pleased that this once contentious issue is a little less so, I can't help but hope to see more. We certainly don't have all the answers yet, but the questions sure are compelling. Thank you for taking this journey with me and for taking the journey through Dialogue Journal, and for all your support. If you want to subscribe or donate to Dialogue, you can do so at dialoguejournal.com/subscribe. This episode was written by me, with editing and music by Daniel Foster Smith. Our content manager is Emily Jensen. Our social media manager is Adam McLean. The Dialogue Journal podcast is produced by the Dialogue Foundation, a registered 501c3, with support from Mary Thebes. This show is part of the Dialogue Podcast Network, a collection of independent, interesting podcasts who promote thoughtful, respectful, and engaging inquiry and discussion of all aspects of the LDS tradition, thought, and arts and culture. And we've been growing like wildfire, with tons of new shows, like Fireside with Blair Hodges, At Last She Said It, Bristlecone Firesides, Strangers No More, Funeral Potatoes at the Singles Ward, and more. Check out all of the shows at dialoguejournal.com/podcast network. That's dialoguejournal.com/podcast network.